10 strange incidents that led to the killing of humans by animals. 1. The fall of cows. In 2013, a Brazilian man named João Maria de Souza was sleeping next to his wife in the city of Caratinga when suddenly a cow fell from the roof. Apparently, this 1,200 kilograms creature was grazing on the hill next to this person's house when it stepped on the roof. The animal falls from a height of 2.4 meters and falls directly on Mr. de Souza. In the first moments, it seemed that there was no problem for him. He went to the hospital with a broken leg, but he could talk without problems and his consciousness was at a good level. But when the doctors were going to perform tests on him, he died due to internal bleeding. His family believed that the time wasted by the hospital was the cause of his death. Mr. de Souza's wife was not injured in this incident. The strange thing is that such an incident happened for the third time in the last 3 years. The mentioned region was famous for its cattle industry. In the first incident, a cow fell in an empty house, and in the second incident, a baby was on the brink of death due to a collision with a cow. 2. Drunk chimpanzees. It seems that due to the great genetic proximity of humans and chimpanzees, they also inherited violence from us. The battle between different groups of these animals in one of Tanzania's national parks or the 10-year war in Uganda's national park proves this very well. Therefore, it is not surprising that they have also killed humans in some cases. Chimpanzees usually look out for weaker people and therefore always favor children. In 2002, one of them killed and swallowed a 14-month-old baby in Gom, Nigeria. In Kibale National Park in Uganda, there lived a chimpanzee who was very wild. This animal was extremely reclusive. Over the years, the chimpanzee became very skilled at stealing people and became so brave that he could steal a child from a woman's back. The fear and terror caused by the animal's work reached its peak in 1998. In those days, the chimpanzee attacked 7 children and killed 2 of them. After killing an 18-month-old baby, hunters followed the trail of the animal and surrounded the chimpanzee. Finally, the animal was killed by a gun. There are various theories for the reasons for the increase in chimpanzee violence towards humans in recent years. Loss of residence can be one of the main reasons. Also, attacks on illegal alcohol factories and alcohol consumption by Ugandan chimpanzees are other causes of this problem. 3. Head injury by flying fish table. The fatal attack of flying fish on humans is rarely reported. Their tail usually hurts in such situations. In some species, this part is poisonous, and it has sent some like Steve Irwin, environmentalist, to death. In 2006, he bled to death due to an attack and it seemed that the animal mistook him for an attacking shark. A month after this person's death, an 80-year-old Florida man survived the incident when a spotted mackerel landed in his boat and hit him. This aquatic species is used to jumping out of the water. The reason for this work of the mentioned aquatics is not yet known, but some people think that it is the expulsion of parasites. The disaster also befell a boater named Judy K. Zagorski. But unlike the previous cases, he was not harmed by the poison of the animal. The heavy weight of this person combined with the high speed of the boat caused him to fall into the boat and hit his head. This incident eventually led to his death. 4. Suicide with a white tiger. Contrary to popular belief, white tigers are not a subset of ordinary tigers and are placed in the ranks of Bengal tigers. Of course, with a genetic mutation. Their presence in the zoo caused a lot of controversy because it allowed the tigers to survive together. The juxtaposition of similar species caused endogeny to form. In November 2008, a zookeeper named Nordin bin Mantang, who was working in the chimpanzee area, was behaving strangely. He was seen shouting and throwing things and even told some of his superiors that they would not see him again. One day at lunchtime he entered the enclosure of the white tiger, while the bucket and his belongings were still with him. The biggest white tiger hit him and seriously injured him. Horrified visitors tried to distract the tigers by throwing stones. Finally, these predatory animals returned to their place. After that, the agents quickly tried to save the man, but they could not save him. 5. Unwanted death of a reptile expert. Carl Schmidt was a famous herpetologist who worked at the Chicago Zoo. In 1957, a snake was brought to Mr. Schmidt for identification. This scientist considered the reptile to be a member of the Kamshamaran family. He, who sought to confirm and prove this classification, took the animal out of its enclosure for a more detailed examination, and at the same moment, the snake bit his thumb. This incident was very unpleasant for Dr. Schmidt, because the mentioned reptile was considered extremely poisonous and injected its poison into the prey through its fangs. Due to the structure of the teeth, this animal must open its mouth wide to enter the poison. This made it very difficult for the said snake, and the reptile could not harm its prey in most cases. For this reason, many scientists until then thought that snakes were not poisonous. Due to the mentioned reasons, Dr. E. Schmidt had no worries about getting poisoned and returned home as usual. This incident made him gain a broad view of the poison of the snake, and therefore he decided to write down his signs and symptoms. Nausea, chills, vomiting and bloody urine were among the symptoms. He writes in one of his notes. September 26, 6:30 a.m., temperature 36.7 degrees Celsius. I have had beans, boiled eggs, toast, applesauce and coffee for breakfast. Bloody urine is observed every 3 hours. Mild bleeding from the mouth and nose continues. Shortly after this note, no further response was received from Schmidt. When the doctor arrived on the scene, he found him sweating profusely. Schmidt was transferred to the hospital and doctors tried to revive him, but it was of no use. An autopsy later revealed that the cause of death was bleeding in the lungs, eyes, heart, kidney, and brain. After that, there were at least 7 reports of people dying from this type of snake. 6 being killed by a goat's horn. 63-year-old Robert Bradman was a very experienced climber. In 2010, he went to Washington's Olympic National Park with his wife and a friend. But while moving on the path, suddenly a goat rushed towards Mr. Bradman. He told the others to keep moving so that he could get rid of this animal. After the others heard the moaning, they turned back and realized that the goat had bitten his leg. This animal stood on Bradman's body for an hour, until the pebbles drove it away. But it was too late to save this mountaineer, and despite the air rescue and quick transfer to the hospital, he died. Park officials later found the goat and killed it. Also, warnings were given to passers-by to stay at least 30 meters away from wildlife. Many blamed human intervention in nature. Goats first entered this area in 1920 to provide a new prey for hunters. Since hunting the animals became illegal, the number of goats has increased to 300, and frequent contact with humans has made them fearless. The climber's wife complained to the park authorities, but her efforts did not go anywhere. 7. Being swallowed by dogs. Heraclitus was a Greek philosopher who was known by strange nicknames. Dark because of his mysterious teachings and Weeping Philosopher because of his melancholy were among his nicknames. He is known for his witty words. He said that one cannot cross the same river twice. Water is always moving, so the second you set foot in a river, the waters have changed. The story of his death is quite strange. He was an evasive person and for this reason he ran away to the mountains. Heraclitus continued his life by feeding on grasses and plants. This caused him to get edema and decided to return to the city for treatment. One of the ways of treatment was that he smeared himself with cow dung to remove the poison and disease from his body. This is where things got more complicated. There are 3 accounts of how he died. Some say that he was buried under all that dung and died. Some believe that Heraclitus died due to staying too much in the sun to dry the dung, and others have stated that the dung covered him so much that he was unrecognizable and the dogs swallowed him. The last case raises many basic questions. Firstly, do dogs like to eat cow dung? Of course, this issue is not very compatible with the intellect, but in the report of his death, interesting connections between his teachings and this incident can be seen. For example, he said that corpses are more valuable to move around compared to dung. Heraclitus also disliked doctors, so death by this strange treatment method was ironic. In another of his words, he said, "Dogs bark at someone they don't know." This sentence can be expanded to say that the dogs devoured the unknown person because he had decided to hide himself under the dung. Also, the punishment of being torn to pieces by dogs was considered for those who were against religion. This philosopher was also against the worship of idols and used blood in purification ceremonies. The fact that the Greek philosopher was disliked by many people created many enemies for him who distorted his teachings after his death. 8. The first death by a tiger in Britain. In 2007, the BBC News Service conducted a poll to determine the strangest tombstones. Finally, Sarah Johnson, a woman who died of edema in 1819, won the most votes. After this incident, his doctors hired an engraver to engrave all the stages of his treatment, including the amount of fluid that was removed from him, on the stone. This is how they advertise their services. The next person on the ballot was a 33-year-old named Hannah Tuinwoy, who was killed by a tiger in 1703. On his tombstone in Malmesbury, these words are written: "He was deprived of living in the prime of life. He had no place to defend and take refuge. A predatory tiger took his life. He is now resting in the bed of soil, until the day of judgment comes." Apparently, a circus troupe had entered the city. They considered a cafe to keep their tiger, probably the same place where Hannah worked as a waitress. He did not listen to the warnings of the animal manager and constantly harassed the animal. Finally one day the tiger escaped and took Hannah's clothes to tear her to pieces. This cafe happened to be called White Lion, and this was a strange coincidence. Hannah's story does not end there. His funeral was very luxurious. It was rumored that he was in a relationship with a nobleman. They even put Hannah's name on a road. On the 300th anniversary of her death in 2003, all the local girls laid flowers on Hannah's gravestone. 9. Suicide with piranha fish. Despite the scary and aggressive appearance of these fish in horror movies, we must say that the cases of piranha attacks on humans have been few. Most of the attacks were accompanied by superficial wounds. They are drawn to an area when people go fishing or throw food in rivers. If the piranha is threatened, it will probably bite. The biggest attack of these fish in recent years was when they injured 70 people in Argentina. Apparently, the swimmers had entered the territory of the fishes and made them angry. In other words, under certain conditions, piranhas can kill a human. If someone chooses this way to commit suicide, this will probably happen. In December 2011, an 18-year-old Bolivian fisherman got himself drunk, jumped into the river and sealed his own fate. Even in this case, the mentioned person died due to a lot of blood loss and the fish could not completely consume him. 10. Mosquito bite, Pharaoh, and razor. George Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, was an English nobleman who lived in the early 20th century. He was interested in breeding and riding horses, but later he turned to the knowledge of Egyptian history and was able to make important achievements. He began his excavations in the ancient city of Thebes, but soon realized that he needed a professional supervisor and cooperation. For this reason, Mr. Herbert started his collaboration with archaeologist named Howard Carter. They published the report of their work in 1912. World War I caused a break between the explorations of these two people. However, in 1922, Carter made one of the most important discoveries in the history of archaeology and found the tomb of Tutankhamun. Mr. Herbert, who had spent a lot of money for this project, moved from England with great excitement to open the tomb with Carter. In the following year, the discovery was exposed to the royal family, officials, and journalists, and while everyone was looking for a good story after the First World War. But 2 months later, Mr. Herbert died. While he was shaving on a normal day, Herbert accidentally cut a mosquito bite with a razor. After that, he contracted a blood infection and later developed pneumonia. The disease affected his lungs severely and Mr. Herbert died easily on April 5, 1923. This death brought strange rumors and some even said that when he died, all the lights of Cairo city flickered. Others stated that King Tut had a similar scar on his face. In this way, the idea of a curse was proposed by a researcher named Arthur Conan Doyle. In the next 24 days, 13 of those who were present in the excavations, including Carter himself, each lost their lives in some way. He died in 1939 due to lymphoma cancer. Of course, keep in mind that the average age of those who died in this incident was 73 years.